We kind of do a panel discussion with people interacting with the panel, of course, but becoming knowledgeable about how to launch and run a successful startup so closely relates to how to do well in a new job too, or in a job you've had for a while. I remember the first time this hit me hard is I was working at a big company and I was new there, and there was this Persian guy that I loved so much. We're still friends. I just haven't talked to him in a while. His name was Ali. He's just the most pleasant guy you would want to know. But when you came to his cube, it was like you'd entered the door of a small business, and they were just so happy to have you there. And my manager even pointed out, Tom, you want to be a good employee? Copy Ali. He works here like he's running his own small business. And he actually was very successful selling used cars on the side. He had this huge network of, getting used cars at a great price, and they were really nice used cars. And he's still popular in my valley for selling used cars. I'll occasionally come across a friend, hey, where'd you get this car? Oh, from Ali Pirinfar. Oh, no way. He's just such a good guy. But many of the principles we were talking about last week, I realized Kim was shaking her head a lot and providing some gems like she's always doing. So I'm trying to ramble just long enough to wait for Greg to show up so he doesn't miss this part. But we wanted to hear Kim. We've known Kim's building her own business, and we've never really heard the full story on it. But to fill some time to wait for Greg, because he said at 9:23, he said 5 to 10 minutes. So I'm going to take him on that. I'll tell you.
Are we on live?
Yeah, we are, I think.
Yeah. Okay.
Guy started it at just the right time. Thank you, Guy.
Yeah.
It would have been nice to have the Amar part there, but that's okay. We might have Amar back to hear a success story from what we advised him on, I hope. So it was about 10 or 12 years ago now. I gathered some smart friends, and we tried to do an energy storage startup. It was a great plan. I was more the physics, design mastermind, but I just brought in the best procurement engineer I'd ever worked with, and one of the best, how do I say, tech managers I'd worked with, and a guy that was really good in the IP realm, but was also an engineer, and then a phenomenal mechanical engineer that lives near me that knew a lot of manufacturing principles, a guy with some great historic management experience. Make a long story short, we were doing the best we could. My friends were encouraging me that you have a good business mindset for being a technical person. It was a wonderful experience. I even had to get tough with an individual or two, like, if you don't start, pulling your weight, we're just going to have to let you go. It was hard to have that discussion with him. But what we realized is for a first business, and it would have been more like a first startup for all of us, it was extremely audacious. In other words, everyone wanted to see a prototype, but the kind of energy storage we were doing was huge and dangerous and needed to be tested. And I was thinking of small prototypes and everything. And then the more and more I thought and looked at some other similar technologies that didn't seem to make it, I just kept thinking of more and more energy storage alternatives. And I just let everyone know, we're not really getting funding because it seems like we would have needed a prototype first and yada, yada. Guys, thank you. If we're not going to abandon it, we're just going to shelve it until we think, we're at a better time to do it. But I never stop thinking about business ideas I want to try. In fact, I wake up in the middle of the night, oftentimes for at least 2 hours at a time, and I'll pray or design things in my mind most of the time. That's pretty much what I did this last night. I do all these 3D experiments in my head, but that's my little story. I'm a big fan of Steve Blank. He was a professor at Stanford. He mentored many successful startup owners that went on to great success. It got to where he was so confident in what he was teaching and his students' ability to put it in practice. When they came in and started describing one of their ideas, he'd pull out his checkbook so that he could be an early investor. But with all that said, and by the way, I'm kind of just stoking a little flame here. As you know, Guy and Greg and I talk a lot about turning our family into a business. We don't see this as something that's going to happen next month or next year, something that's hopefully going to happen within the next decade of our inception. And but we really think we can come up with something unique. And obviously, Magdi and Kim are involved in our discussion. So are Hugo and Gus. But we're just taking it slow. We're going to get our books out. We're going to keep being open to various forms of cash flow. But with that said, Kim, and I'm going to have to berate Greg when he finally shows up. Would you? Oh,
yeah. Oh, did he just show
the
up?
pressure. Yes, Greg. I was just about to speak bad about you, but you showed up I was explaining my startup that didn't quite it didn't make it, but Kim's going to share her business with us now.
Okay.
Go, Kim.
So, this goes back. I'm trying to think of how long ago it was that we had the discussion when, Greg, you had said, okay, everybody put out in the world what you want to do. Do you remember that? So I, at that time, said that I wanted to do something where I could use data for good. And I wanted to start something that would be able to help people in the world. And so with that in mind, I started joining hackathons and seeing, what would happen if I just put myself out there and started seeing, what would stick and what wouldn't stick. And we got third place in one hackathon, and then in the next one we got another one. And both of the things that we had worked on were going to the market for trying to get people to fund it. But the first one was something that was going to be local to India, which I wouldn't be able to spend time in. So that one, the team was going forward, and I left that team and I joined another. And we started doing an application for safety and security, both mental and physical. And then we applied to different programs, and we got into MIT Solves Accelerator program, which is all very exciting. Like you learn an enormous amount in terms of these kinds of things. But one of the things that we learned was the importance of really targeting and understanding your market. And so what we had, we had this really great technology, and I think everyone can empathize with this in this family, because when you feel like you've got a great idea, you start making it, you build a prototype, you get all of your wireframes together of what it's going to look like, and you get all excited and you're like, look at how cool this is so amazing. You press this and it goes straight to 911, you press this and it goes straight to 988, and you have all these great things and features. And then you get in front of a VC and they're like, how many people have you tested it with? and they really are extremely blunt and extremely quick with their criticisms. And so we went out, and basically we were told by a number of VCs that you created a product before testing your market. And so we had to go back, and what we're doing now is building up that research. So we had compiled in a very short amount of time something like 300 interviews, and they were like, that's nothing. So we were like, but that was all of our extra time. What do you mean that was nothing? So basically we have to go back, and we have to get 1,000 to 2,000 interviews, and we have to take our prototype and try and find people who would invest on it small scale. So get some clients and traction in the market, and people who would sign these things called letter of intents that basically said, if you build this, we will buy it. And we learned a lot about starting a startup. And so I think that one of the things that I can share with all of you guys is when you're starting a startup, before you actually build anything, get your idea down on paper, go out and test the idea. And there's lots of ways you can do it. You can use wireframes. You can use a lot of ideation tools that are out there, like from Figma and stuff, where you can put what that application looks like together, and then you can go out and interview people and the markets that you think that you're going to be going to. But the first thing you really need to do is identify, what is your problem? What are you trying to solve with your product? And who has this problem? Who are you going to solve it for? And then you have to decide, is the person that you're solving this for going to be the one who's buying the product, or is somebody else paying for it? So like if you're doing a social impact product and you want to do something that the end user is going to be able to download for free, let's say like in our case, a safety app. If you're giving people the ability to download a safety app, who are you helping in that regard? Like who are you helping to take away responsibilities for or help fund? And in the case of safety, let's say if you're dealing with enabling people to have access to safety points and reach safety points, then it might be the police that you're asking money from. It might be the government that you're asking money from. It might be not-for-profits that are also interested in female security or interested in different mental health issues. And so when you're going out there and you're figuring out like, okay, what is my product and who is my product for and who's going to pay for it, you then have to go out and talk to all those people. And you need to talk to your subject matter experts and say like, what is your biggest problem? What are your needs? And how can, what kinds of things do you face on a regular day? And there's different ways that you can go about doing that. So when you're asking questions, especially when you're in the first stage of developing your product, you want to ask questions that are totally open-ended. You don't want to lead the people that you're talking to, which is another thing that's really difficult, because you want to try and like talk about your product, but that's not the thing to do in the beginning. In the beginning, don't talk about your product, don't talk about your idea. Simply try and figure out what people need. And if your application is meeting that need or not, that's something that you keep to yourself. You just ask them like, what's your day like? What kinds of things happen in your day? What are your biggest needs? And then you compile all this information together and you start figuring out like, how is your application going to meet those needs? And then you have to really think about your business model. Are you going to be a for-profit? Are you going to be a not-for-profit? Are you going to try and partner with somebody else? Are you going to try and roll your product up into someone else's offering? Or are you going to try and go direct to consumer? Are you going to try and go through an organization? All of those kinds of things you need to ask yourself. And every step along the way, you have to be really, really lean. So for example, we're building it with an Oracle database, and we basically used everything for free, like any free services, that's what we went after. And so we end up having everything very modularized, because if you want to build something and you want it to be flexible so that you could, let's say you're going to eventually get funding or get into an incubator program from AWS or from Oracle, you want it flat enough where you could just pull all the pieces together and put them on that cloud or that service. And you can build it up when you finally get to the point where you've got funding. But before you get funding, treat everything like you are so lean that you could live on a piece of toast for a year. And also going back to what Tom had said, one of the things that I find is so true, and that was a really hard lesson, is that you really need to make sure that you are very clear about what you're trying to do and what everyone's role is in doing it, because it's free time for a lot of people. If you're building something and you don't have any money and you're not making any money, you have to make sure people are all into the idea and all want to do the same thing and are all committed to that idea, because a lot of people have different inspirations for doing things. And sometimes that can be frustrating. Sometimes it could be disappointing. Sometimes it could be inspiring, because people will like pick up the mantle and go running ahead with it and do more than you thought that they could. But you really have to kind of know who you're dealing with and know what people can and cannot do, and be able to work with that and be able to be flexible with that.
Real quick to Kim, I noticed that you liked my example last week, and I want to reiterate it because I think it's a good summary of the wisdom you're sharing with us. And it's this: if you have a feedback control system, and you don't get the feedback frequent enough, the system can quickly become unstable. And nowhere is that more true than in a startup you're betting your wallet on.
Exactly.
Now, I want, Kim's making a great point about if you're putting your whole wad on this, you've got to absolutely follow the principles she's saying. However, you could also do the Warby Parker approach. It's a funny story that Adam Grant shares, and this is just a little fork in the road to what our wise Kim is saying. The reason Adam was unwilling to invest in the Warby Parker guys when he first met them, he said, "Well, are y'all going full time with this?" "Oh no, we're keeping our day jobs. We're kind of testing this." And after they went big, he handed his wife his checkbook and said, "I'm not going to run the investments anymore like these." I said, "I don't trust myself. I just, was going off old world thinking with these Warby Parker guys, but they were working hard. They just thought, no, we're not going to risk our current day jobs in case this doesn't work."
Yeah,
And,
and a lot of VCs actually expect you to. They really do. That was one of the big questions we got, like how many full-time people are dedicated to this? And we were like, none.
Yeah. And Kim, I want to ask you too, as I've talked to various people that have started up businesses, I said, don't you think you should make every effort you can to do it without investment?
Yes.
And they've all said, absolutely. If
Yeah.
there's a way to do it, do it. But then again, there is a lot of money out there if you know what you're doing. By the way, I want to make it clear, this new role I'm in, it wasn't as much money as I might have been able to get at other places, but it had equity. And I absolutely wanted to learn from my CEO. Even though I'm called lead data, I'm really the head of data science, but there's a head of machine learning and we just work together. He's another PhD, but it's literally a tiny startup, and we've contracted another company to do a lot of the app level work. But I joined the company to learn from this guy because he's launched so many successful businesses. And you know what's cool, guys? He's just a guy, but he holds a methodology that he's used for years, over and over and over again successfully. Now we're just writing an app to help guide people through that process enhanced by AI. But Kim, keep going. I just had to interject those things.
Okay, first I'm going to ask what Guy wants to ask.
Honestly, I got the question for the answer of my question during your talk, but still I have something on my mind. Whenever you said let's say, give us this road mapping for starting your startup, I found it's more related to not startup, for big company whenever they're starting product. So what is the difference here between what's happened in the big companies and what's happening in the startups?
I think it's very similar. Yeah.
Okay, but there is major part, which is, we can get it also from what Tom is saying. I think it's whatever we did at the end, we didn't test the how. We test why we need that, we are serving, who's the audience, who's the client, but also how to do that. And honestly, when we are talking,
do you mean by like UX UI how, or do you mean how in
from
terms
front end and back end? No issues for that. So
yeah.
UX UI and also the back end, whatever it will be related to data science model, whatever it will be traditional modeling, who's the user, who's the supported user, who's the rules that will play there, all of this. It's part of the design first, and also it's iterative. That means this how it's not, it can affect your target audience, and also it can be affected by your target audience. So this is what I want, this iteration, it has to consider always the how inside it. And yes, because how at the end, by the way, maybe this is one of what I face. Whenever you follow this strategy to test your product, you will reach the point, if everything is answered in correct way, you reach the point that even your investors or your targeted audience will tell you how you are going to answer these questions, how we are going to achieve this task in details. So at that point, if you, at least if we don't have a prototype, I mean, the prototyping, it's part of it. It's not the major, let's say, task we have to run and start with it, but also it has to be iterative with all the steps that you mentioned. This is my point in the startup, because this is what make the startups dynamic on the technical level, just like what Greg told us last week. It's just an idea. Correct me. I'm okay to be wrong.
No, I think you're absolutely right. I think that you know, when one talks about design building, and when you're dealing with a startup, the whole design methodology, that iterative process of going back and interacting with your end users and the target markets, it's all a self-feeding loop. Absolutely. And going back to what Tom was saying, you have to constantly incorporate feedback. And you know, the one thing, and this is going to go back to last week when we were talking about the idea of pivoting. You know, the one thing that you learn when you are doing a startup is that you need to be flexible. You cannot hold on to your ideas. You cannot fall in love with your product. You cannot assume that you are necessarily only serving one market. You might find that what you're building is actually much better suited for another market that you never even thought of, that is coming out through the research. And then that market has a bigger, more potential need for your product. And you might not consider yourself a subject matter expert in that market. So for example, I'll tell you guys what happened with us. We went out and we were doing interviews and figuring out target markets for what we had started as a major security app, you know, a safety app, a personal safety app like Citizens. And we interviewed more and more people. And what we found is that people were more concerned with mental health than with their personal safety. And so we had to suddenly adapt and adjust all the things that we were doing towards mental health. That's really hard to do when you have, you know, it's easy to say to sort of, okay, now we're going to pivot and we're going to move in this direction. But when you have a bunch of people working on an application and like everyone's got one idea in their head, like this is what we're doing, this is where we're going with this, and you suddenly say, actually, the market says we have to go this way. People don't like to move that quickly. People don't like to change their sort of reasoning, their big Weltanschauung about it, you know. So they, when you're working with people, you kind of have to have it as a given that, okay, what we want to do is this, but let's make sure if you want to make it work, if you actually want to get funding and sell it as a product and make a business work, then you have to be flexible enough to listen to what the market is telling you. And, you know, that doesn't necessarily mean that you have to give up your goals. It means that you have to be flexible in achieving them. So for us, for example, we were focusing both on mental and personal safety so that it became holistic safety, so that we wouldn't give up everything that we had done on the safety side, because we did this whole geo mapping thing and like, you know, getting somebody from point A to point B really safely. And we didn't want to lose all that work. So we just incorporated it in as another feature. But you know, the one thing that we did learn that was really important is that you can't serve two masters in whatever you're doing. You have to pick what you're focusing on. And, you know, it's really interesting. One of the VCs that we spoke to that was giving us feedback as a mentor was like, look, you know, whatever your feature, whatever your product is doing, I want one user, one story, one solution. I don't want to hear anything else. One user, one story, one solution. And you could have lots of features and they don't care. They want to see how one feature is going to, you know, really get one user to use it exactly as they need to use it to make a market. And that's it.
This is the concept of Dave and Andy in the Pragmatic Programmer talking about a tracer bullet. You can integrate that wisdom from creating an end-to-end, like not very complete solution, but it works end-to-end, like Kim's saying. But you can pull that out of code and put it in any realm.
Exactly.
That's what Kim started. Just show that a minimal viable product is being used by someone and appreciated by it, right, Kim?
Exactly. And that MVP is marketable, that there's actually a market demand for that MVP. And then, you know, one of the things that's also interesting, me having the sort of finance background, I was all over the sort of estimates and the 5-year outlay and you know what it's going to look like. I was going down to really like details. And I also learned that you know that doesn't matter so much. You just need to show that at a certain point you're going to be profitable, and show what your thinking is about that, and show what you're thinking is going to drive, like what do you see as the market drivers for that? Are you relying totally on funding? Do you have people who are actually paying for your product already? Do you have people who are downloading? Like what is the model that you're going to be using to try and make some income off of it? And you have to be able to show that, because you could have the best product in the world, but if you don't have an idea of how that product is going to make money, and you don't have any traction in showing that that product can make money, then VCs aren't going to be interested in you. Your product, I shouldn't say you. They should. And another thing, speaking of you, VCs are very interested in your team. They jump all over. Who are you? Where are you from? What have you got? You know, how much have you personally invested in this in terms of time or money? And you know, they ask you to basically give them the 30-second pitch of why you and why this product.
So
Yeah, but
Kim, you go,
sorry.
Maggie, you go.
Yeah, I was just thinking that I think the most difficult part for a a startup compared to a business, back to the guys thought that, you know, a business has an establishment. So it is existing, it's running, it has network, it has the customers, it has products and so on. To come up with a new product, this is much easier because you have the background. But with a startup, you have to start from scratch. And as Kimberly described it, not everybody can afford to be involved full time, because it's a leap of faith, basically. So it's if you have money, or you are a philanthropist, you can do that easier, or you have a crowdfunding behind you, or whatever investors behind you, you can do that. But most of the people are just starting the startups with, okay, I have my safe, secure job, and then let's work on it, and let's see how it is evolving. And that's why I feel that the most important part is the planning one. I don't know how you see, Kim, but I think the planning and the preparation to see that, okay, what is my value proposition? Who are my key partners? Who can be my key partners? Who are my customer? Do I have any customer relationship? What is my cost structure? What are the income stream? How will I get it? As you mentioned, do I get some aids from governmental places, local or regional institutions? So it is not only about the project or the product to see that will it work or not, but it's, yeah, how much this whole business will work, because who is my team? Yeah, but very important. How much time do they can dedicate? How can we plan that? Can this be changed in time? So it is not only iterating the products part or phase, but also how the business can be built up. And I think a lot of startups just forget about it. I mean, a lot of people are just entrepreneurs, they have ideas, they have products, but for example, they don't have experience how to build up a business.
Can I interrupt you?
Yes, of course.
Okay. I agree with you, but if we are talking about product only, then it's almost kind of research or project for university, and that's all. Yes, the planning is important, but the product itself is important, and the interaction between the planning and the product, how the planning is affecting the product, and the product, how it's affecting the business model, and the business model, how it's reflect to the planning once again. All of this together, it will come with a good startup. That means the product, it's not fixed from the beginning, and also the planning is not fixed. When you start with the plan, it will reflect to the product. But once you have the product and you test the market according to that, you might change the product or the plan itself. Exactly. This is my point. The iteration here, it's much faster. It has to be much faster, much agile.
Yes.
And the team has to be very flexible to it.
Yeah,
this
I
is
absolutely agree with you.
The challenge of the startup, really.
Yeah, and this goes back to what I was saying, and I absolutely agree. you know, I see your point, Magdi. It's very important to be mindful that you have to have a business canvas, for example. You have to have an MVP in your mind. But as Ghaith was saying, you also have to be extremely nimble, like really extremely nimble. You have to be able to adapt and adjust your product and your business to what the market is demanding. And what's really scary with technology, and one of the things that we found is, you know, you go out there, you start, the more and more you learn about the market, and the more and more you learn about the product, and you look at your competitors, the more you realize, oh my God, it's really crowded. And you have to come up with some sort of unique offering in a space that you had no idea was so crowded. You thought you were such a genius, like I came up with this great idea, and so did like 500 other people at the same exact time. And now it's this kind of race to see who's going to make the best version. And sometimes you have to really look at something like that and go, okay, wait a minute, like, do I have something that is really compelling? Do I have something that is really going to sell better than these guys? And if so, what and why and how? And you have to it's a very humbling process, actually. It's extremely humbling, because you realize that people and markets and things change so quickly, especially with technology. Because really, one VC put it to us this way. He's like, look, I like your idea, it's great, but tomorrow, if I wanted to build something with technology, poof, I have it built. I want to see something more than just technology. I want to see, what is your why? What is your reason for creating this product, and who is the person who's going to be using this product, and why is it important to them? Why do they even care? Like, who's going to ensure that your product is going to be something the day after tomorrow, and the day after that, and the day after that? And how are you going to grow that product? So going back to what Magdi and Ghaith were saying, you need a roadmap. You need to be able to figure out, like, how am I going to bring this product to market? How am I going to grow this product? And as it grows, how is it going to change? What am I going to be doing to ensure that I have iteration on that roadmap, and that I'm constantly looking at my market? You know, there was a very interesting, and it doesn't have to be something new. Like, if you look at, I don't know how many people are familiar with Parade underpants. They're like, you know, it's a garment, you know, it's an undergarment company that was started by a 24-year-old who was going to Columbia. And she decided she really hated Victoria's Secret. She hated the fact that there were all these runway models who were really twigs, who didn't represent her or anyone else that she knew. And we're basically creating this, you know, this market of what it means to have undergarments and what they should look like and feel like. And she was like, no, I disagree. I think that there's another way to do that. And so your differentiator might be that you're representing people that aren't the mainstream. It might be that you are representing a need that isn't a tactical need. It's more of an emotional, social, human need. In the case of the Parade underpants, it was the need to feel like you didn't have to wear a certain kind of brand because it was more socially acceptable or more sought after. And so you really need to think in terms of your product of like, okay, so, you know, how are we different? Are we different just in terms of the technology, but or are we different also in terms of who we're targeting and why we're targeting them and how they're going to use this product? And to Ghaith's point about, you know, not having that kind of internal structure in a company. I mean, I actually think inevitably companies and startups are going to be very similar, because people are going to have to kill products faster within organizations, because there's no reason to put so much money into developing products that aren't constantly tested with the markets. And companies that exist, you know, a lot of ways that they do it is they create subsidiaries so that whenever they're trying out new product markets, they don't have to take the financial loss. They just have it as a subsidiary that's taking the financial loss. And so in a way, it's easier for companies that are established to have startups, you know, sort of intrapreneurs as opposed to entrepreneurs. But they seek out people who are able to, as Tom was saying, run little businesses within their business, you know, who are able to take something from scratch and look at it and go, okay, this is working, this is not working. This is how we're constantly testing it. This is how we're making sure that what we're developing is actually needed.
I have one question, and with this question, I would like to also bridge towards Greg and have his opinion also, because he was also involved with product management. It's about, you know, being, as you said, being very quick, reacting very quickly, also with respect to the competitors and see your place and the USP and so on. I was just wondering that do you feel the moment when you say that, okay, we cannot hesitate more, and we cannot stretch it more, we have to go out, otherwise we use the moment, because other one will comes up? Because I heard some of the people who had really great ideas, and they were hesitating, they were planning, they were iterating, and they had their roadmap, but still it was too long. And at the end, somebody came up with almost the same idea, so they had to drop the whole thing. And I'm just curious, did you feel this? That you may face this, for example, or there is no danger at all in your case?
No, I think we definitely felt this, and I think that you continue to feel it, because, you know, one of the things that I learned in the process is that when you are building something, you know, you have this idea of who your end market is, but then you actually have so many different people that you're trying to pitch to, because you're trying to pitch to the people who could be your customers, but then you're trying to pitch to the funders too. And funders have their own agenda. And so you have to figure out if you're matching what their agenda is. So like, let's say it's a social impact fund. What kinds of projects do they fund? And, you know, is there a model that you need to fit into to get their money? Which is, it goes back to why it's great to build vertically, because if you can build vertically, then you know you have something. Like my business that I have now, it's an art-based business. We built it vertically. We didn't get funding to build it. We just built it from scratch, and you know, there was a need, we met the need, and we've been building and working on that need for 20 years. But when you're trying something that is new and something that, you know, you don't have that established need, you need to figure out if you can build up something vertically, and who would be the best person to do that with. So you when you look at a market, you actually have to segment who's going to be the best target to start this product with before you roll it out to everybody else. And because there is this whole thing of like, when you're designing things and you're thinking about your nudges, and you're thinking about how you're going to build people up on your product design and your ideas, you have to be willing to kill the beginning to get to the end. You know, you have to really think about how your product is going to grow. And sometimes you can't. Sometimes you just have to go with it. And so there's always the possibility that what you start with turns into something else entirely, and you have to be able to say goodbye to that and just, you know, shelve it basically, and wait for a later time that you might be able to use it or not be able to use it.
Okay, Greg, I'm curious to hear your experience in this respect. That did you experience, for example, that you have to jump over and expedite the whole process suddenly because either the management said that, the investors said that, or that you felt that there is a pressure and yeah, doesn't matter what happens, we have to come out with the product?
Yeah, absolutely. There's always this sensation of, you know, being on the competitive side, that you want to be the first to come out there and be the market leader. There's always this need and pressure to be the first one to deliver. And there's a truth behind that, to become the first service provider or product launcher to gain the first set of market share. But you know what really matters is that your strategy wins. You will always have competitors, whether you start a startup or spin up a different product out there. You will always have somebody who will have the same idea as you. So typically what you'll see is that visions for a company should almost never change, but you'll find that different startup founders will have somewhat the same vision in terms of they see something that they want to fix. Like there's an issue in healthcare. I want to provide everybody the best healthcare ever. So you'll have multiple founders with almost the same vision, with
same mission statement, different visions, but same mission statement.
Same mission statement.
Yeah.
And then you have strategy is what differentiates everyone, in the sense of it should be changing slowly. something like price is a strategy. So you can't be changing your price fast because you'll lose customers, for example. But strategy is what differentiates those who will execute and win versus those who will execute and lose. So this is where the focus also must be. So it doesn't matter whether somebody has the same idea as you, same mission or whatever, but the strategy is what counts. Strategy might mean we will only hire people who will do X, Y, Z, or we'll have a dream team, we'll have the right price, we will have X, Y, Z. So you will execute against that strategy very well, and that will move you closer to the winning phase. Strategy is what, to me, differentiates company X versus company Y, in a sense of company X provides better customer service than company Y, which means customers love to work with company X better than company Y. That's an example. And then the tactics are the things that you need to try quickly out there, kind of like marketing tactics, or the way you kind of spin up frameworks to interview customers and quickly change and tweak your products. Those are the things that you need to be fast about, because that's how you quickly iterate the product to make sure that it meets the customer's need. Yes, I've seen that in established companies, in a sense of they want to be the first to push something out because of the market positioning type thing, or market share control type thing. But for a startup, I wouldn't care much about whether I'm the first to put out the product out there, because execution is going to differentiate me from others. Because if it mattered so much to be the first one to put the product out, then on my pitch deck, VCs or sponsors or investors wouldn't care about that slide that shows where I stand against my competitors in that quadrant, right? So they would assume that I'm the only one experiencing out there, right? So that's why it doesn't matter whether I'm the first one or not. Another thing I wanted to put out there, Ashish, give me one sec here. Kim, you did explain one technique to put a startup out there, which is you go out and interview people, and then you take that and build a product to kind of address. I've seen this method, but I've also seen another method where people would identify problems without interviewing folks. Something like healthcare. We know a lot of problems are existing in healthcare right now, and there are people who have access to information and spot issues, like in supply chain, for example. We know there are many problems with supply chain, especially this year, right? But there are people with access to that information somewhere, somehow, that can identify a problem without interviewing. Simply by Googling, you can find a lot of things. And then, so these folks, what they do, and they get successful at as well, added to the method you described earlier, is that they go ahead and build. And then when they go out and build something, a minimum viable product or minimum lovable product is the term that they love to use nowadays. They push it out as fast as possible and then ask questions.
Yeah.
Hey,
that's when if you have the technology and the team to be able to do that, that's exactly what a lot of businesses do. Yeah.
Yeah. So they spin it, they build it fast. They build like the simplest thing, and then go out there and say, hey, try this. Let me know if it fixed XYZ problem for you. And what would you change in that product to make it better? And then they capture that information and then use that to iteratively improve the product. Yeah. So that's another technique, in addition to what you described, that I've seen startup and established companies do out there.
Yeah, and I think what Greg is leading to is also very important to mention, which we haven't really discussed, which is the the double aspect of being both lean and using and agile, you know, in the agile sense of things. It is really, really important to have that sort of agile methodology where you are constantly setting up different goals for people, and people are meeting those goals, and you're on top of things to the extent that you have your prototype, you roll out your prototype, you see where that's going, you iterate, you go back to it, you adjust it, and everyone's on the same page with that, because it does happen quite quickly.
Yeah.
It's a really good point. So yeah, so get to know agile method tools like Confluence and Jira and different things like that, because that's also very helpful if you're developing.
Hey, Ashish, you have a question, right?
Yeah, his hands up.
Go ahead.
Yeah. So basically, it is.
Ashish, I can't hear you.
It sounds very far.
Just louder, Ashish. It'll
Yeah,
adjust.
just louder. Yeah, just louder.
Is it audible now?
Yes, much
Yeah.
better.
Yes, much better.
Okay. Good. So it is a two-part question, and first of all, like both questions are relevant to that. I am a new person to basically initiate a startup. I have a couple of ideas in mind, but those ideas are not exactly any business idea, but a product idea that I want to build this product and convert it into a startup idea. So with this in mind, I don't have a particular mission statement with me that what I should be aiming for in the future years, because for now I can develop the product. I can try to create a business idea revolving with that product. But in the long run, how can I keep up with that product to sustain as a startup or enlarge into a large company? That's my first question. I hope it is clear, or shall I elaborate more?
No, I think it's clear. I mean, I would say that you should take the generic version of what you're trying to do and join a hackathon and see how it does in terms of people being interested in it and people saying, wow. Like, one of the biggest things I learned is that being really protective of your idea isn't going to get you anywhere. Like, the more open you are about things and the more people you tell what you're trying to do, the better. And that is so hard to do, because when you build something, you are very guarded about it. You don't want to share it. You don't want people to take it from you and be able to run off with it. But that's exactly what you need to do, because whatever someone is going to take and run off with was something that anybody could have come up with anyway. And so you have to think, like, when you're thinking, well, how can I build this? You put out all the things that are basic that you can get as much feedback as possible from, like the idea of the business, what you want to achieve with the technology, if the technology is something that is wanted or needed, and if it's something that's complicated. And, you know, then you throw it out there and you see how many people are interested. And you also try and figure out, like, what am I really going to need to make this happen? And the only way that you're going to know that is by putting it out there, because we're all limited by just being individuals. We can't do everything. So you have to try, especially if you don't have any money, to get as many people interested as possible. And that's where the management comes in, and the agile process and the project management, because you really need to have everybody on the same page when you're doing stuff like that. It's much harder, I think, as individuals with no money to do a startup than it is to be a sort of entrepreneur in an organization and come up with an idea.
Yeah, got it. That's helpful. Second part was kind of related to the first. So after I have defined my mission of statement, maybe for how long should one be planning in the initial stages? Let's say, what should be my goal in 5 years, 10 years? What should be the limit that I should be planning for in the initial stages?
3 years. Don't go any more than 3 years, because there's no such thing as knowing anything more after that. You cannot. You cannot know anything after 3 years. We can barely know what's going to happen next year in the modern world. So, but it's more about communicating your thought process. You know, you can have an idea of how you want to make money and how how the product would grow, but you're never going to know exactly how much money it's going to make. You know, you can estimate, you can look at the size of the market and figure, okay, what is my total available market? That's the total market that you can go after, that are like people who have a need for XYZ product. And then you go, okay, so what's my actual market that I can achieve? Like, you know, there's this total world market out here. What makes sense for my particular segmented market, my, you know, my available market? There's a SAM term for it. I'm trying to remember what the SAM stands for, but basically you want to go for what your market is that's available to you that you can actually get to right now. So it might be your community. It might be a community of people that have already told you we're interested in this product. And so you go to them first. And, you know, as you're building that out and you're showing how you're going to look at that, you think, okay, you know, once I have all these people, how long do I estimate it's going to take to get all these people? How am I going to reach them? And then once you have that, you go to the next phase. Well, then who am I reaching after that? So let's take, for example, Citizens App, you know, $140 million funding. They started off as like a vigilante company saying like, we want to be the first ones to help you instead of the police. And so people used it as a safety app. And then they were like, hey, upload what you see, because everyone was reacting to George Floyd and people who were, you know, basically receiving violence from authorities. And so people started uploading their content, but then they found that people weren't paying for the product because so many people were downloading it for free, but they had to find a way to make more money. So then they started having subscription services for people who wanted to have accompaniment walking home. So they have like a personal digital assistant that comes on and they walk home with you so that you are engaged with somebody. And they're trying to find all these different services to get people to pay. But then at the same time, they realized, okay, people aren't doing this enough. They had to actually pay with their funding to have people go out and record stuff because they couldn't get enough people to do it on their own. And so then they realized, well, wait a minute, actually what we're getting more response from our users and from the people that they're testing is this idea of being able to create your own news. And so they're turning more and more into a social media company, and they started as a safety company. So, you know, there's this, the growth process is not necessarily known, but to be able to have in your mind, well, I've got users that they got funding from the government for safety. And then they realized they needed to have subscription services. And then they realized that they needed to have content. And so their progression was from one service to another that didn't really look like the first service. So you can't possibly look out 5 years because it might be a totally different product by then. So that's, you know, it's much more important to think about the type of people that you want to have the service for. And then once you get those, you know, there's I think it's called the Maslow curve, where you have the people who are in the beginning, you have the people who sign up for the technology first, the first responders, you know, the sort of people who are really into a subject. And then you market
Early
to them
adopters,
first.
Kim.
Thank you. Early adopters. Yes. So in the beginning, you have your early adopters. And so like take the case of Apple, right? So Apple, their early adopters are the people who bought into the vision of think different. They don't care what Apple makes. It's like Apple makes a new product, I want it because I respond really well to all Apple products and I love Apple and I want to get that iPhone when it comes out. And then there's the regular adopters who are like, yeah, I'll get it after it's been out for a while and the price comes down and, you know, I can use the features or get it through my phone carrier. And so you have to identify who those early adopters are, because those are the people that are going to drive your profits. And those are the people that you can test and ask people, like, what do you think of this product idea? And they'll tell you because they love your product or they love your idea.
Let me just share one thing, responding to Ashi's first question. I just shared in the chat room a really good course with Acumen. They are offering very, very good free courses, and I was participating in it, and the whole assignment was basically that you have to come up with an idea, and you have to assess. And we went through all the stages to build a business on a social basis, so that we have a very great idea. I mean, we saw that we have a great idea. It is for the well-being of people. We want to do this. We did it with a friend of mine with the same mind. And during the process, week by week, we had to realize that our idea will not work. So we had to iterate, but it was such a mind-blowing process. And I think you also realize this in practice, Kim, that when the funders are coming on board, when you get back the feedback through survey, you can also do it in two different layers. So for example, you can test the whole idea through your friends, family, then you can make it a broader layer, so with individuals, unknown individuals, for example, and so on. So there are more stages for that as well. And then it is, I mean, it can be really a shocking that even you have this idea for 5 years, 2 years, 1 year, and you think that it is such an amazing one. It can be that you get to the point, and that's why I'm saying that for me, that would be obvious to start with the business model Canva, to see that, okay, what do I have? What resources I have, what I can expect, how it will work. Yeah, you cannot plan long term. Really not, because you don't know how your product will be perceived. For example, if it's a big boom, then you have to. Then I think that you face the next difficulty, because then you have to build your team. You have to build the company. I mean, the human factors, and and this is what I feel that most of the startups are struggling. That they started like 5, 10, and then suddenly you need 50, and 100. And they cannot jump this step or these stairs because they are not ready. So and they are not thinking, for example, involving experts, how to build a company culture, and because with 5 people it works totally different than with 10, 20, 50. So it's it is, and that's why you cannot really plan. It's not only the product side, and obviously you cannot plan the market, what will be in 3 years or 5 years. So yeah, it is. There are. I see also the human factor behind it, and not only the team itself, but for example, you have to outsource certain things at a certain level. For example, how much you can rely on your partners, for example, who are delivering something, or who are delivering your products, for example. So everything is changing basically. So what you can try to plan how you deal with the change on the way, basically. So it is, I think the core thing is change management, that you are prepared that, yeah, this is now, but in 1 year we are in totally different situation. So there is no status quo at all. So the flexibility, it's not only from the product side, I see, but also the organizational side.
Magda, I'm jumping here just to make fun comment, but it's not my time to speak. I know organization, I cannot name it. The human resources working on one product, it's they are much more bigger than the customers themselves, than the users that are using that product. So yes, everything is growing, but there is no users. So this is one of the examples. Okay, my comment, it's not now after Tom, but yes, I have a comment on this, on change management and planning and the product and how it's to iterate to each other, but not now.
Me too. Once Tom talks, I'll talk too.
It's a miracle. I wasn't sure I would get to talk. I was waiting for Maggie to say it was okay for me to talk. No, I wanted to summarize something I hear, because these are all very important details. But there's one thing we can't afford to miss. I'm a big Robert Kiyosaki fan, by the way. Rich Dad, Poor Dad, Cash Flow Game. My kids grew up playing cash flow. The thing we can't miss is no business succeeds unless the product or service it's promoting makes money. And it won't make money unless you've frequently gotten feedback from the market that will give you the money, and you've designed the product or the service that they want to pay you for. But the way you do that is to not bring your baby into the room, the business boardroom, but to look for the best idea that accomplishes that goal. that the market feels like I've got to have that. I mean, all this other stuff is icing compared to that cake. That's what has to be accomplished. That frequent market feedback to say, when are you going to release this? We can't wait for it. You've got to get it out ASAP. And in fact, I would say the most evil person on the team can be me, the engineer, because they want to perfect it, because it's becoming their baby the more they design it and refine it. But no, you need to put it in someone's hands and fix what they're telling you to fix, not what you think needs to be fixed. I need to radius these corners. It's not going to break. Put it in their hands so we can figure out what they want to change.
Yeah.
Anyway, very good discussion. I just wanted to say, don't leave here today without understanding that's the essence of all this talk, is to get frequent feedback from your market. And I'm gonna listen again because this is rich.
Kim, you?
Okay, so one of the things that goes that deals with what Magdi was saying, and this is particularly relevant to people who want to do a startup that has to deal with social impact. There's a thing called theory of change, and it's really relevant to the whole process. That it's kind of very similar to the iterative process in design building. But basically, the theory of change takes what you want to impact in the end. So, what do you want to achieve with your product? So let's say you want to achieve safety, or you want to achieve a sense of well-being, or something very targeted, like you want to achieve a lower price point for this ability, for this service that you're going to be giving to your customers. And then you backtrack from there and you go, okay, if that's my end result, what do I need to have in place to make that happen? And what do I need both in terms of the market that's buying this, the people who are funding it? What do I need in terms of the technology behind it? And you backtrace all the way back, it's sort of like by propagation, but you go back to the beginning and then go, okay, so what are the first steps that I need to achieve to be able to reach that end? And along the way, so you have your inputs of like all of the things that you're looking at that you can measure and figure out, am I leading towards this? How do I lead towards this end? And you look at all of your inputs, and the outputs are things that you can then take and measure to say, okay, so if I'm given, let's say, for example, I want to lower, if I'm in a hospital, I want to lower the number of hospital beds that are being used by diabetes type patients, right? So then you say, okay, so what do I need to do to have that happen? Well, I need to make sure that people are more educated about diabetes. I need to make sure that people have syringes or things that they can have where they don't have to come into the hospital at a certain point. And you figure out all the things that lead into what affects that number of beds. And then you start measuring to say, okay, how many people have received more education? Have the numbers gone down? And you try and figure out what were the drivers behind the numbers going down, and you try and capture that. And if you can show that you have a theory of change, that you have this way of monitoring and measuring your impact and whether or not you're achieving your impact, then you can go back and iterate that process. And so that whole idea that what you don't capture, you can't measure, is very true in any kind of endeavor, whether it's a startup or not. You have to be able to capture how you're developing and what the real results of each stage of that development are. So I hope that helps, Ashish. But look into it. It's called theory of change.
Guys, yeah.
Yep.
Guys, yeah.
No issues. I can speak anytime. I'm just jumping. Okay. Beside what I have comment about what Tom said. It's yes, the engineer who want to make things perfect. It might be the most toxic person. I think also there is another point which is very important. We don't have to fall in love about planning without moving to the execution. So this is something might appear a lot, and this is what can change your product idea into a dream only. So that's why, and when I talk about the agile methodology, there is something on the agile methodology. When you start with sprint, don't stop, don't accept any change until you finish it. So yes, you have to, on the short term, you have to be very finite. You have to go and finalize it. But once you started, All of that time, you are collecting the change, you are testing, you are doing everything. But wait, once you finish your sprint, you can go ahead and back prioritize what you have to do and all the change requests what we want, and what is most important, your original plan or the change request that you receive. So this is my comment about planning and the agility. Yes, don't fall in love about planning. And here's another toxic person might appear on the team, who's the person who's planning. So maybe I can say it's just like somebody who like to cook very nice dishes, but he don't like to taste it. This is how it will be. Yes, by the way, I'm the one who's working on the kitchen a lot. Most of the time when I finish, I feel I don't have to eat this dish. It's very nice to eat.
I love
It's
your
better
metaphors,
than
Greg.
eating it. Yes, exactly.
You've got me thinking about that song, There's a Rat in the Kitchen.
I wanted to add something real quick about Utah mentioning feedback. I was reading something the other day, and then he hit me. Alexandra. She, there's a friend of mine who put something there. She mentioned about receiving feedback. Something of the sort, I'm just paraphrasing here, is that the day you stop, like, people don't like, bad criticism or criticism of any sort, or even companies find it hard to digest. And sometimes they fall in the comfort of seeing criticism stop. But there's a danger to that, is that the day feedback stop coming in or criticism stop coming in, sometimes it's because people stop caring about what you have to offer.
Exactly.
And once they stop caring, you're on that slow slope to deprecation, where your product or what you have to offer matters no more, at least to the environment where you're offering it. It's kind of like having a family that enjoys having you around and stop giving you feedback for certain bad behavior you may have. Once they stop, that means they no longer care. They can see you go fail out there, and that's a big signal or sign that you need to do something or change something about the way you behave or what you're offering and things like that. So just wanted to leave you guys with this message.
Yeah, it's a great point, Greg. I mean, self-awareness is something that happens both on a personal level, but also on an idea level. You have to be aware of what your idea is, how resonant your idea is. And if it's not resonant, and this ties back again, like what you were saying about people feeling uncomfortable getting feedback. It's very true. I mean, when we had to change, when we had to pivot, as they say, people did not want to hear that. And people were very defensive, saying, well, how do you know that those interviews really count? How do you know that those people aren't just one small sample? And the thing is, you have to make decisions, because yeah, you could go out and continue to take time to interview 5,000 more people and figure out if your t-test is applicable or not. But you don't have time in a real world situation to do that. So you have to go with what you're getting. And I think going back to what Gaith was saying, that's why it's so important to conclude a sprint when you do it, because those sprints become modules that you can use again in the future, depending on the new circumstances that you're learning. But you have to respond to the things that you're learning, because if you don't, you're living in your own fantasy. You have to go by what's actually in the market and the traction and what's there, because that's the only real thing that you have. Everything else is just conjecture.
Yeah. Another thing that I spot too that VCs don't like is that when you have one product and one solution, they want to make sure that you're not going to market it different ways to different customers. You have to market the same, you have to send the same message out there, especially at an early stage, because what they're trying to look for is if you're kind of double dipping or diversifying too early, where if they feel like you're going after different customers, they really don't like that. So you have to market it the same way for everyone, so you can have that one customer. To me, that one customer is not one company that you serve or one person that you serve, is it's the same persona
Yes,
that you
exactly.
serve.
Yeah,
They're like, you have to serve that one persona, focus on that only. Because if
Yeah.
they feel like you're serving different personas at the same time, they feel like you're not really focusing enough. And that
Yeah.
could be a
But
danger
it's
to, you know.
it's somehow the security thing, no, for them from their perspective, that they go for a
Well,
secure solution.
Well, it's kind of like they want to make sure that you're focusing your attention
Like,
on that real pain point and that you're not, you know, dividing your attention to different problems at the same time, because they know that the less focus you have, or as you spread your attention to multiple things, you tend to kind of lose focus and not win in their strategy and lose opportunities. So they want to make sure that the personas are clearly defined and that your marketing, you have one marketing strategy or go-to-market strategy for that one persona.
exactly.
Especially
It's like a
at
customer life
stage.
cycle. Yeah. And one of the things I think Greg is touching upon, which is very true and very important, is clarity. You need so much clarity when you are doing a product, and so much clarity about who that product is for and why you're doing it. Because if you think about it, you're starting off with a prototype, but that prototype has an entire family life to it that includes marketing, that includes strategy, that includes, how you're tying in your KPIs. You have to really treat each individual persona and the product that you're creating for that persona as a business. That's that one thing right there is a business, and you have to show that that business is going to be profitable. And yeah, they don't like it when you have more than one client. It's so true. So true. They're very much about the one client, one solution, one persona.
Okay,
Very much.
Tom, you wanted to add something?
Yeah, to get deeper into all the wealth that's being shared. Simon Sinek is a very wise and humble man. He started really trying to observe why some of his marketing campaigns really took off when he was running this marketing consulting company, and why some didn't. And then that turned into him speaking every chance he could get on what he had discovered, what he had learned. And then that became Start With Why in his TED Talk, in his book, in his other books. And now he's just this inspirational writer and speaker. But he's very humble, but the stuff he's discovered is powerful. And I know I've already shared the story, but it's worth repeating. He was with Microsoft executives after teaching them some stuff, and they handed him a new Zune. This was back in the iPod days. And the Zune was an amazing product. And then he went to Apple not long after that, and he was alone in a car with an Apple executive, and he tested something with that Apple executive. He said, Microsoft handed me a new Zune. I've got to say, it is just head and shoulders, I'm paraphrasing, head and shoulders better than the iPod. And the Apple executive looked right at him, smiled, and said, I have no doubt. Apple is a master at being engaged with their market. They're not necessarily creating the best products.
Exactly.
They're just creating what appeals. They've made a culture of appeal. I don't know how they keep doing it, because I talk to tech experts and they're always telling me, why do people buy Apple iPhones compared to Androids? Yet iPhones are still super popular for some reason. The point being, I wrote this up above. I'll just repeat it real quick, briefly. Oh man, it's way up here. It was the sooner, maybe I was starting to type it. I don't remember where it was now, but the sooner you get your product or service, even just a minimal viable product, in the hands of the people that are going to buy it, the better. Yeah, after you get it working to their delight, then you can let the engineer do some cycles, the designers, but that should be more on reducing manufacturing costs or or just costs in general, instead of, making it more appealing to the engineers. However, it's okay to create something like Greg shared last week. Greg created this amazing dashboard for a market of one person, and that person really loved that dashboard. And that's okay. But the only customer Greg had was Greg. Well, if Greg wanted more customers, as soon as he had something crappy looking, he should have said, now this is crap, but do you kind of like where it's going? What do you want to see next? Boom. That's how you sell a dashboard. Okay, I'm going stealth mode.
Actually, I was just thinking about an analogy about this whole thing, what you were talking about, how to do the whole process with the smart with the startups and so on. And I think it's like a baby. So that's then when you have an idea and when you have a product, it is like your baby, and that's why you have a fear to get negative feedbacks. Then at some points you just realize that, okay, is this, or you're just questioning, is this a verified feedback? Is it a valid one? Is it a legit one? You just, because you just love your baby. And during the discussion, what I learned, obviously, how you are parenting as well. You have to let your baby grow. You cannot be a helicopter mom or a dad. You just support, encourage, support, give everything that it can grow and it can evolve to something beautiful and amazing. And then in the same time, you also have to think about your own future, that, okay, at some point, this baby will leave because it's 18 or 20 or whatever. And I'm still stuck at home alone. So I have to learn to be alone or to be in the team I want to be, or in the community, or do what I want. So maybe I'm thinking about a different baby in a different way. And yeah, this is just an idea. I was just thinking that.
Magdi, I know others want to say something first, but I'll tell you something that my mom always say, and I find it true, whether you're growing that baby, whether it's a company or a person, tolerance is not love.
Yeah, I think when you have a
Gary
child, then
that's brilliant.
Yes, it really is.
Yes, yeah, you start to differentiate when you have a child, I think, and you learn a lot when you are parenting.
Well, I think the thing that accounts for both, babies, the same analogy is you have to let your kids fail. I mean, that is it. You have to let your business idea fail, and fail big. Like you just have to watch something that you like get destroyed and be okay with it. And I think it goes back. But also
you have to let your idea to fail.
That's what I'm saying. That's the baby. So you have to let the baby
in the terms that you realize that you cannot be stubborn, and you cannot just stick to the idea that my product is the smartest, the best, and so on. When the feedback says something else, even after launching. So
I will tweak it a different way from what you're saying, Kim, is that you have to accept the criticism. And that's my point behind the tolerance is not love, is that you're tolerating this company who's about to fail, and you reject those criticism coming and you don't do anything about it. Well, you see failure coming, you just don't want to make peace with it, right? You don't do anything about this criticism to avoid failure. So as a parent, as a co-founder, as a founder of that company, your role is to take that criticism and use it to take action with that baby. You channel that criticism in a way where you help that baby grow. Because if you don't take action, you don't make peace with that criticism, eventually that baby will fail.
Yeah.
But by the way, there is something. Yeah. Sorry, Kim. There is something. I think even the business ideas or the product ideas, it's for a person, it's more critical than a baby, because it's something related to himself sometimes. So yes, I think it's the criticism here. It will be more effective. That's why we have to start with this understanding that this is not you first, it's your product, it's not you.
Yes.
So this is the major difference. Now, this is the first. The second, also when it's related to baby, you know that your baby at the end, he has his own life, his own ideas, and you can somehow trust your your genetic part that it's reflected to him. But with the product, there is no genetic part reflected to him, so to the product itself. So at that point, yes, I think the product, it's more critical than baby even. If we didn't have the correct vision behind it, because sometimes it will reflect even to yourself. I'm talking about, by the way, if we go out of the technical or data science or any kind of even software engineering products, go to other for example, for me, I'm involved in business family, which is, related to the sweets, chocolates, and something like that. Sometimes really the ideas for my uncles, for example, it's considered that they consider themselves what they are trying to do. It's more personal than a product and something in the market. So here it's becoming it's becoming really very, very hard to them. So yes, I feel that, yes, really, we don't have to fall in love about our ideas or our products. You have really to differentiate between what we have on life, and also not considering this product or this project or this startup as your life. It's not you.
Yeah, and it's really important to know that criticism isn't going to come necessarily. Feedback comes in many forms. It doesn't necessarily only come in criticism. It comes in, seeing numbers go down in terms of people who are downloading the application. It comes in terms of different signifiers that there's a change in the market that people no longer need. So for example, like in safety apps, there's so many safety apps that people don't need any more safety apps. They can either try and improve the ones that they've got out there, or they can switch it to something else. But it's also being able to read the weather, sort of like in Mary Poppins, the weather vane, it can change, and you have to be able to see that, or you're going to miss it. And I think that the most important thing is when you are doing any kind of development, whether you're trying to solve a problem for your boss or you're trying to create a company or an idea, is to do the best that you can do to solve that problem. But once you've done it, you let it go, and you try and see what kind of life it can live on its own. And if it can't, you accept that. But it's not you. It's just that idea has reached its end, and so it either has to change into something else, or it has to be shelved. And it's I think the big takeaway is that there's no such thing as wasted time. You're whatever you've built, whatever you've done, if it works or it doesn't work, you've learned something from it. And if you haven't, then you haven't been reflective. You haven't been aware while you're doing it, and so you need to work on your self-awareness. But otherwise, it's all learning. That's my humble opinion.
I think in this whole process, there is a point when objectivity just kicks in. And then when the data, so the analytical side just kicks in and say that, okay, these are the figures, and you cannot do anything about it. Yeah, if the figures are black and white and say that, okay, does it work or not? Do I have to change or not? And as it doesn't matter how much you stick to your product. Obviously, there is a life cycle as well, so you have to. That is obvious that you have to deal with that. But on the other side, yeah, you cannot avoid being objective, and it can come sooner or later. But one day it will come and say that, okay, yeah, we have to base our decisions on facts, and these are the facts. Basically, the question is if you get these facts correctly, because you can modify. I mean, how data works, so you can modify, and you can tell different stories. So the question is if you understand what the data says. That is my point. Yeah. But I think after a while, you have to rely on the data. I think in all business.
And define
types.
viability, absolutely, because that data is going to have to, it's going to reach a point, thinking back to Guy with the chocolate, you know, and even with us, with our art restoration business, if business changes so much and you cannot, no matter what you do, you try marketing, you try this, you try that, and nothing changes, that's when you, even if you have something that people need, even if there's still like, you know, 5 people knocking at the door saying, I love your chocolate. If it's time and there's not enough people and it's no longer profitable, then you're just flogging a dead horse. You know, you really need to let it go. I'm hoping that's not the case with your chocolate.
But it's
Your
so
family's
interesting.
chocolate is so good.
This is when you consider the look into kind of I don't know how you call it, behavioral economics.
Yeah.
I think that
Mhm.
yeah. When you just, because you can manipulate a little bit psychologically that one. So I do not think that is the end, because I think you still have that tool, you know, because it can be that the chocolate itself is the same, but the packaging is different, and that win the prize.
Yeah,
And then
no,
you
absolutely.
can
just to
and you
finish
can
the
get back
discussion.
on the market.
We're
To
all worried
finish the
about your chocolate
discussion,
now.
to finish the discussion about the chocolate, I'm here in Germany making the chocolate for myself only. So I'm in that place, just like the dashboard for Greg. So yes, I'm doing chocolate for myself, and I'm happy. I'm buying my business. That's all.
Good. It was a great discussion. I think we can wrap it up now. It was a very familiar discussion. I really like that way as well. Thank you for sharing your thoughts and experience about this. I think we could give some tips and takeaways how to start a business, or maybe we just we just delivered the message that be careful, think twice.
No babies. No babies.
Yes.
Be
It is
man
not
enough and
it is not
be man.
parenting.
Yes.
One in one.
Be man enough and woman enough to get some ugly feedback from your market.
Yes. Okay. Thank you so much. This is the last session this year, because we will start our holiday season. So I wish you all nice vibes. And joyful
Happy holidays. Happy holidays.
3 weeks break, right?
Yeah.
That's what we agreed to.
Yes. Yeah. So we will come back in January. When is it? 7th. Yeah.
So,
I think.
Okay. Well,
Yeah,
have a happy New Year, everybody, and a happy Christmas and holidays. And I hope you all enjoy time with your family.
Stay on Slack, everyone.
Yes.
Still stay on Slack. We're close to 1100. So I promised to throw the celebration. We didn't throw it. Well, I guess I danced for everyone. That's what we did.
That is the easiest.
If anyone posted some good links there, I don't know, Maggie, I know you had some. You could put it in the Slack channel too. That would be good to have. And strategize. Even the course that you have.
Yes.
You can put it in the Slack.
I will put. Yep. Okay.
Family be a good place to put that? Family channel?
Oh, yeah, any of them.
Okay.
But family chat's good if you want the most people to see it.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then, Guy, I'm going to just keep this open so we can talk after the others say bye-bye.
Kick down.
Bye-bye. Like the stewardess.
That's our cue, guys.
See you on the,
I know,
see you
right?
on the 8th of January. Bye.
Bye-bye. 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 Bye-bye.